She was 3 years old when he left. She would tell you, if you asked her now, she is in her 80s, and people have asked, and she has answered with the specific, particular precision of the person who's been turning the same memory over in her hands for 70-some years, and who knows exactly what each part feels like. She would tell you that she remembers a morning with completeness that is unusual for a 3-year-old. She remembers the kit bag. She remembers a specific way of the goodbye hug. The way her father pressed her face briefly into his shoulder before setting her down. The specific smell of his jacket. She remembers standing at the window after the door closed and watching him walk down the street. She remembers that he turned once at the corner and waved. She remembers deciding, in the specific way that a 3-year-old makes the specific binding decisions that shape the specific subsequent years, without deliberation, without the specific adult weighing of the specific pros and specific cons, simply as a specific pure expression of the specific pure intention. She remembers deciding that she would wait at that window until he came back. Her name was Dorothy. Her father's name was Edward. He was a sergeant in the British Army, called up in 1940, shipped to North Africa, and then to Italy, and then, in the final years of the war, to the specific theaters of the specific European campaign that took him further and further from the specific window in the specific house in the specific English town where his daughter was waiting. Dorothy's mother, her name was Ruth, was a specific person who had to manage the specific situation that the specific decision had produced. This is something that Dorothy herself has acknowledged in the specific accounts she has given over the years, that the specific weight of the specific vigil was not carried only by Dorothy. It was carried, perhaps more heavily, by the specific woman who had to watch her daughter sit at a window for 4 years and who had to determine day by day how much to try to move her and how much to let her be. Ruth tried, in the first weeks, gently, the specific gentle redirection of the specific concerned mother, offering alternatives, suggesting that Dorothy come away from the window and play, come to the table, come to bed. Dorothy came to the table when meals were ready, and she went to bed when she was required to, and in the specific hours between she was at the window. Ruth tried less gently as the weeks became months, and the months accumulated into the specific weight of the specific ongoing thing. Dorothy did not yield. By the end of the first year, Ruth had stopped trying to move her, not because she had decided Dorothy was right to be there. She told an interviewer many years later that she had never been certain whether Dorothy's vigil was a specific beautiful thing or the specific worrying thing, and that she had lived with both assessments simultaneously for 4 years without being able to fully commit to either. She stopped trying to move her because she understood that the specific window was a specific thing Dorothy had, and that the specific removing of the specific thing Dorothy had was not the specific help appeared to be. Dorothy went to school. She was a capable student, attentive, diligent, the specific kind of child who manages a specific work regardless of the specific circumstances, because the specific work is the specific available form of the specific control. She came home from school and went to a window. She ate her meals on a tray beside the window when Ruth permitted it, which was most evenings because Ruth had understood that the meal was less important than the window, and that fighting the window during the meal produced a child who ate nothing and sat at the window anyway. She did her schoolwork on a small board balanced on her knees beside the window. She slept in her bed when Ruth required it, which was every night, but she woke early and was at the window before the specific street had its first activity of the specific morning. The neighbors noticed. The specific English street was a specific kind of English street that notices things without making production of the noticing, that accumulates information quietly and files it in the specific particular way of the specific particular community that has its own understanding of what is its business and what is not. The neighbors knew about Dorothy at the window. Some of them found it moving. Some of them found it concerning. Most of them found it the specific particular thing that doesn't fit neatly into either category, and that you therefore leave alone. The children at school asked questions. Dorothy didn't answer them, not defensively. She simply didn't answer, in the specific way of the child who has decided that the specific thing is too important to be turned into the specific conversation with the specific people who don't understand what it is. For years past, Edward came home in the spring of 1945. He had been in Italy when the war in Europe ended, and the specific process of the specific demobilization had taken several months, and he arrived in England in May and made his way home by train and bus and finally on foot, because the specific last mile of the specific journey was a specific mile he wanted to walk. He turned onto his street. He was thinner than he had been. Italy and the specific years of the specific campaign had taken weight from him that he would not fully recover. He walked differently than he walked when he left, with the specific particular quality of the specific man who has spent 4 years moving carefully through dangerous spaces and who has not yet fully understood that he is allowed to stop moving carefully. He stopped in front of the house. He looked up at the window. She was there. He has said this in specific accounts that Dorothy has preserved of the specific things he told her over the years about the specific moment. He said that he had thought about the window during the specific 4 years, not constantly, not with a specific dramatic regularity of the specific literary device, but at the specific particular moments when he needed the specific particular thing and reached for it, the specific image of the specific house and the specific window and the specific small daughter he had left beside it. He had not known she would still be there. He put his hand over his mouth. He stood very still for what Dorothy, watching from the window, experienced as a long time and what was probably 30 seconds. Then he came inside. Dorothy did not run to the door. She waited at the window until she heard the door open and his voice in the hall speaking to Ruth. And then she left the window. For the first time in 4 years without being required to, without a mealtime or a bedtime or a school morning as a specific reason. And she went downstairs. He was in the hall. He looked at her. She looked at him. She said, "You came back." He said, "I said I would." She had no memory of him saying this. He had said it the morning he left, as part of the specific goodbye. And she had been 3 years old, and she had not retained the specific words. But she had retained something. The specific sense of specific agreement. The specific understanding between them that his leaving was temporary and his returning was certain, the specific knowledge that had sustained the specific 4 years of the specific window. She said, "I know. I waited." He said, "I saw." He did not ask her why. Dorothy has said this many times, in the specific way of the person who has identified the specific most important detail of the specific most important moment. He did not ask her why. He had seen her at the window from the street, and he had understood everything that needed understanding, and he did not require the specific explanation of the specific thing that did not need explaining. That night, after Dorothy was in her bed, not the chair beside the window, the specific ending of the specific vigil, complete in the specific most ordinary way, Edward sat with Ruth in the kitchen, and Ruth told him what the 4 years had been. She told him about the first weeks of the gentle redirecting. She told him about the schoolwork on the small board and the meals on the tray and the early mornings. She told him about the neighbors and the children at school. She told him about the specific moment. Sometime in the second year, when she had stopped trying to move Dorothy and had simply accepted that the window was where Dorothy was going to be, and that her job was to make sure Dorothy was warm enough and fed enough and rested enough to be there, Edward listened to all of this. When Ruth finished, he was quiet for a while. Then he said, "Were you angry with her?" Ruth said, "No." "Were you?" He said, "No, but I might have been if I had been here." Ruth said, "That's the thing, though. You weren't here. She was. And she found the thing that she needed and she held on to it. You can't be angry at a child for holding on to the thing that gets her through." He said, "No, I suppose you can't." Ruth said, "She's going to be all right, you know. Whatever made her do that, the specific thing in her that held on for 4 years, that's going to serve her for the rest of her life." She was right. Dorothy grew up to be the specific person that the specific 4 years had produced. The specific particular person who, once she has decided something is worth holding on to, holds on without yielding to the specific pressure of the specific people around her who suggest that holding on is a specific, less reasonable option. She married. She had children. She held on to her marriage through the specific difficulties that the specific long marriages encounter, with the specific particular steadiness of the specific person who has been holding on since she was 3 years old and who understands, from the specific inside, what holding on produces. She held on to her father. He lived until 1978, 33 years after he walked back down that street and looked up at the window and saw her there. They were close. in the specific particular way of the specific father and daughter who share the specific secret knowledge of the specific agreement that nobody said out loud, the specific agreement that his leaving was temporary and his returning was certain, and that she would be at the window when he came back. She was at the window when he came back. He came back. The agreement held. Dorothy still lives in England. The house is gone. Sold decades ago. Long since changed hands and changed faces, and become something entirely different from the specific house. It was in the specific years of the specific window. But Dorothy has driven past it, occasionally, over the years. She has sat in the car outside and looked at the window. The specific window, still there, the glass replaced many times over, but the specific frame in the specific wall, the same frame in the same wall. And she has thought about the specific 3-year-old who sat there for 4 years and the specific thing that kept her there. She said, in the most recent interview she gave, when she was asked what kept her at the window, "I don't know that I can explain it in a way that makes full sense to anyone who wasn't 3 years old and watching their father walk away. I just knew he was coming back. I just knew it. And I knew that the window was where he had last seen me. And that if he came back, he would look for me there first. And that I needed to be there when he looked." She paused. Then she said, "I was right, wasn't I? He looked. I was there." She was right. He looked. She was there. That is the full accounting of the war child who waited for years at the window and the night her father came home.